Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Carolyn. Thank you for joining me. This is another installment of our discussion of Brené Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart. And this chapter is a great one, and it has undertones in every other chapter that we've read so far. It's chapter number 9, The Places We Go When We Search for Connection. And if you're familiar with Brené Brown's book, The Gifts of Imperfection or Braving the Wilderness, other books that she's written, many books, you know that this feeling of connectedness is throughout most of her work. Because remember last time we talked about shame, and shame was such a huge factor in disconnecting us from other people because of the fear and the feelings of inadequacy that come along with that. So this chapter has some crossovers into that last chapter. It's a nice flow the way that this one came after that last chapter that we just discussed. So in every chapter, she always has certain words that are associated with the places that we go when ... right? So this one is a collection of words: belonging, fitting in, connection, disconnection, insecurity, invisibility, and loneliness. So just like other chapters, but really on a personal level, this one definitely hit home with me as well. And I will probably share some things like I normally do. So when you think about belonging, and I did some journaling about this after reading this chapter, what does that feel like to you? Doesn't that feel like maybe you can be your true self? And it might be that feeling, what are you doing back there? We have a kitty that's wanting to be famous in the background. Maybe it's a feeling of being quote unquote at home. If you had that feeling of being at home growing up, uh, it's probably a comfortable feeling, right? And knowing that you're a part of something and that you don't have to be different to be accepted. Yeah, I think acceptance would be a good word for that too. I like, but Brené had an artist draw some pictures of kids in terms of the difference between fitting in and belonging. So it's a cute little spread here of cartoons, and I'll just read some of it. So the difference between fitting in and belonging. Belonging is being somewhere where you want to be and they want you. Fitting in is being somewhere where you want to be, but they don't care one way or the other. I guess I think about the fitting in maybe like in terms of school, where you might think, oh, I have to be this certain way or dress this certain way for people to accept me, or for me to just not stand out in a negative way. Belonging is being accepted for you. Like I said, accepted. Fitting in is being accepted for being like everyone else. That makes sense, right? If I get to be me, I belong. If I have to be like you, I fit in. So if you were just trying to fit in, I can't imagine that you would feel that much connection with others, right? I mean, it might be like a superficial connection though. You might be like, oh, thank goodness I don't stand out, or I'm not different than everybody else and sitting alone at the lunch table. Um, but it wouldn't necessarily be feel like a real connectedness, because there wouldn't be an authentic, genuine part to it, right? I know that I have some great friends at this point in my life, and I've had friendships throughout my life, but I feel like some of my friendships now are just so much more true in that they really get me. And I had a conversation recently, and I know you watch my channel, so you'll know who I'm talking about when you hear this, but I had a situation with a friend where I was struggling with like, how do you want me to act in this situation? What do you need from me? That kind of thing. And my good friend said, just continue to be you. And I was like, oh my God, that's like the best thing that anybody could ever say to me. Because, first of all, I don't know how to be anybody but myself. But secondly, that made me feel so seen, and that it was okay to, maybe I'm always worried that I might not have the right reaction or do the right thing or say the right thing. But for somebody to love me and say, it's okay, you can just be yourself, it was like, that was so liberating. And I haven't had many moments like that in my life, which is sad. Because I'll just say one thing, and on page 134, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm sure you've heard of that from psychology class. But a lot of these things you hopefully get when you're growing up in your own family. But for me, there's a disconnected feeling in my family. And in losing half of my parental situation, my mom died when I was young, there was not a glue that kept us together, or that, usually the mother is like the nurturing one that will tell you that you're beautiful, or that you're worthy, or that you are loved no matter what, and you always belong at home. But there was not that message. I don't know if there would have been that message, honestly, if she hadn't died, because I feel like there were issues, in my whole family situation. But I think if you don't get that even in your own home, then it can make you insecure in every other situation. Because even if you went to school and you maybe were the only one eating by yourself or something like that, if you felt like you could go home and you had at least that basis of, like, we've got psychologically or physiologically that you're safe, safety in general, love and belonging is like right in the middle of these Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And then it leads to esteem and self actualization. If you don't feel that love and belonging, then it's going to be a constant, lifelong search for that. And we know, you guys know Carolyn's issues. And when we were reading the Madly in Love with Me book last year, it's like that's at the heart of so much. So I can really relate to this wanting to belong. And I did, like I said, I sat down and did some journaling after reading this chapter, and I wrote down, these are the places where I feel I belong. And then I wrote down, like, what does it feel like to belong? And, I don't have that family feeling with my own family. But when I happen to have a really good friend from college, and her family, they've like adopted me in some respects. And I love the way that they raise their kids, and they just love being together. And there's just such a feeling of home, and you never feel like you're imposing, or that somebody doesn't want you there, or that you're weird or you don't fit in. It's like they're so excited when you visit. It's like the thing that everybody would love to have for their own family, which I don't have. So I do feel like that is how I like to feel in a family when I belong. So at least I can identify that. But I know for myself, and maybe you can relate to this too, when you're searching for that belonging, it can lead to some insecurities, because if you're not with people who do say, like, just be yourself, which isn't always the case, right? Then you can sort of feel like you have to, like, mold yourself into this person that you think other people expect. And maybe your family is that for you too. Your family might expect you to be a certain way. I don't feel that way in my family. Like, I don't think that they expect me to be any differently. So I do just, I am myself with them, but it's just not like a super comfortable feeling overall. And I don't feel like, especially in this time in my life, I feel like everybody has a place to be, in that, like, there's family units within my family now. And it's me and Annabelle, and I can't take Annabelle with me everywhere. But, Christmas is such a trigger for me normally every year. It's like, don't have a breakdown again. Um, and it's like, because things like that, and Christmas is just an example, but a day like that where I feel like everybody belongs somewhere in the world, I'm always searching for that place that I belong. And it's such a lonely feeling. We're going to talk about loneliness, but it's such a lonely feeling when you feel like everybody has a place to belong and you don't. And Christmas is a bad example, but because that's like the ultimate, and I know not everybody celebrates Christmas, but for those of us who do, it does feel like spending Christmas alone, which I've done many times, is difficult. And it can just exacerbate your loneliness if you have to spend it alone, right? So it's like, it's just a day that sort of like brings out that feeling that you don't want to think about all the time in terms of like, where do I belong and who do I belong to? And like, who do I have to spend this national holiday with if I can't necessarily be with my family who has like their own little belonging groups in of itself. And you might, I feel like I belong with my friends and stuff, but I it's not the same thing that you want on a national holiday. You kind of want to be somewhere like with a significant other or with their family or with your family. I mean, maybe at some point in my life, if I don't have that I will, I'll just have like a group of friends that also, feel the way that I do, that they're looking for a place to belong, and then we somehow like all belong together. But I don't know, that to me still feels kind of foreign right now. So anyway, I'm being way too transparent here and talking about myself personally, but this conversation of belonging really is at the heart of some of my own issues. So I got a lot out of this. So we have to belong to ourselves, Brené says, as much as we need to belong to others. Any belonging that asks us to betray ourselves is not true belonging too. So that would be like the fitting in, right? If you were trying to betray yourself. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing in and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share your most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. And I will say, I can be alone, but it is just especially hard on national holidays. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. So that situation that I outlined with my friend where she just said, just keep being yourself. It was like, that was that was absolutely a moment of true belonging. So thank you. You know who you are. So I think I said in another chapter recently about, it's like this human need. Like, we're tribal in nature, right? I think I said that. Like, it's this human need to belong and to connect with other people. Love and belonging are irreducible needs for all people, Brené says. In the absence of these experiences, there's always suffering. Yeah, so I did mention in another video, we can go live off in the woods, maybe, and enjoy our solitude, but ultimately, there might be some suffering in that. You might find companionship, though. I mentioned Annabelle, and she's definitely my companion. Maybe you're someone that lives out in the woods and you have a farm and your animals just become your connection. That could definitely be something. I don't think animals can give you every sort of, I mean, maybe they can give you affection and stuff like that, but I don't think they can give you every sort of element. They can't necessarily have conversations with you verbally anyway, or at least in the same language. Annabelle and I definitely have conversations, but it's cat language versus human language. Because we can feel belonging only if we have the courage to share our most authentic selves with people, our sense of belonging can never be greater than our level of self-acceptance. So yeah, there's a level of self-acceptance in this, and knowing who you are and feeling like it's okay to be who you are. So I feel like I've gotten to that point. Like, I'm not afraid to be who I am, and I don't usually conform. And and I would actually rather, like in Brené's book Braving the Wilderness, I'd rather be in what she calls the wilderness, which might be like sitting alone or whatever, than conform to the crowd. I'm not necessarily a conformer. I was lucky though. I have talked to people before who in school did experience that feeling of like not having any friends, and just that would have been terrible for me. I will say that I was lucky for most of my school experience to have a group of friends and to feel like I did belong somewhere. There was later in high school where I sort of like lost my way a little bit and didn't really know where I fit in, because I just felt like I was changing and other people were staying the same. And so I did experience a little bit of that, but it wasn't to the point of feeling ostracized or anything. So I know that some people I've spoken to before have gone through that, and I think that would have been terrible for me since I didn't really have that belonging at home. So I probably would have turned out to be a different person. Fortunately, I've had people in my life that have enjoyed my company, and I think I'm an interesting, talkative, silly, really unique mix of a lot of different things. And I'm not afraid to talk to people. I definitely talk to strangers. I live in a complex here where I will just randomly talk to somebody in the laundry room or whatever. And I'm not afraid to do that. And I have had people say to me something like, "Oh, you're so friendly," like I guess maybe that's not as much of a normal experience for some people, where there is a kind of disconnectedness in our whole culture now, right? And especially with COVID, oh my goodness, like when we were all socially distanced, right? There was a huge disconnectedness. We might be connecting virtually, but or digitally, but we were not necessarily having experiences in person and doing collaborative things. Like, I'm so glad to be singing again and back with a chorus that I sang with so many years ago. And it's just feeling like so nice to just have a relaxing group experience with other people. And there's a nice connectedness to that when I'm doing something that I enjoy with other people and something that they enjoy as well. So I like this page here too. Be here, be you, belong. So that's the component of belonging. And I sure gave that one a lot of airtime here. But when we think about connection, I would say that that is like the belonging part of it is probably the most prominent thing about being connected with others, right? Because you want to feel like you belong, right? At least I do. So I've been really writing a lot about this. Now, she does, I'm not going to go into a huge discussion of this, but there is an interesting conversation about, and this is relevant to our world today as well, about people in marginalized groups that, or like a minority is another way to say it. Like they feel like, where do I belong? Like if they're looking for people that either look like them or have the same sort of background as them, or maybe speak the same language, then there can be an uncertainty. She calls it belonging uncertainty. So imagine that. So say you're in a country where you might be the only one that looks like you, or you're the only one that talks like you. Then belonging, wow, that's got to be a lot harder. I have not been in a situation like that. Um, I mean, I can think about a situation where I was in a group of people doing uh, community theater production, and I felt a disconnected feeling with that group and didn't feel like a part of it, even though like I was definitely a big part of it, but like didn't feel a level of acceptance. But it wasn't like because they didn't understand my language or because I was so different from them. It was just like the way things fell, and that there were like social groups established and stuff, and I just didn't like make my way into them. I can be a little socially awkward. I think that's a common thing. I was reading recently about people that have been through trauma in their childhood, or who just didn't have those Maslow hierarchy of needs met to have a sense of security or confidence in every situation. I think I've said this before too, like when I the Myers-Briggs scale, I'm an INFP, but I'm an introvert by 51%, and then I'm an Yeah, and I'm an extrovert by 49%. So I can definitely have the extroverted part of me come out on stage and in a social group situation. Like I love playing games with friends and I just get so competitive and like so my extroverted side really comes out. But overall, I love to work alone. Like I'm a solitude needing person. So I'm a mix, though. I mean, that's a very close percentage. But I wouldn't say that I'm always an extrovert. And I forgot where I was going with that. I don't know how that connects with anything. Anyway, I'm talking more about myself than the book here. Hopefully, you're getting something out of this, though. So then obviously we talk about connection, belonging, and then what about disconnection? So actually I was sort of talking about that a little bit. I know that feeling, but I feel fortunate that it's been few and far between. So it is an uncomfortable feeling for myself when it does come up, because usually I can find my way in most situations. Like I am totally fine going to a gathering where I don't know people. And even if I'm sitting by myself, that's fine. But what I do find is that a lot of times people just gravitate to me. Or I was at a reception after a funeral recently, and I just happened to like put my bag down, go get some food. I came back and I'm like surrounded by all these people. I didn't know one person, but I had great conversations. And so I don't mind those kinds of things, but say you're not comfortable like that. Say you are, and I don't even know if it's like an introvert extrovert thing, it might be, but say you really are introverted or you just hate that feeling of not knowing anybody. I mean, half the time it's like it doesn't matter if you know anybody because you may never see them again anyway. So, but that feeling of uncomfortable, like uncertainty and not belonging, maybe that's like your biggest fear, is being in situations where you don't belong. Then that might deter somebody from going to a social situation where they don't know somebody, or trying a new hobby, or joining a group or something like that, because it's just so wrought with like what could happen, or what's it going to be like, or who's going to be there, or maybe I won't belong, but you could miss out on having an amazing experience. Yeah. So connection. Connection is the energy that exists between people when they feel seen, heard, and valued. And I mentioned feeling seen before. That to me, I would say, and I don't think she has a definition of it, but to me, that would be like somebody appreciating me for who I am and maybe understanding where I'm coming from and not scrutinizing or judging the way that I am, and just kind of enjoying my point of view, enjoying my company, that kind of thing. Again, like a feeling of belonging. When, here's exactly what I just said, when they can give and receive without judgment, and when they derive sustenance and strength from the relationship, then that's connection. Feel like you have that in your life? I hope you have at least one person or more that you feel that connection with and that sense of belonging. So what about disconnection? Disconnection is often equated with social rejection, social exclusion, and or social isolation. And these feelings of disconnection actually share the same neural pathways with feelings of physical pain. Sadly, I know that feeling also. And that is going to lead into insecurity and loneliness. So I mentioned insecurity a little bit. That has so many layers to it, right? Because insecurity could be something like, uh, actually, there are multiple examples in here that she gives, like, because I think of like food insecurity and um, economic insecurity, and there could be personality insecurity. So she breaks it down into domain specific insecurity. That's when we are insecure about a specific resource in life. For example, food insecurity, financial insecurity, stuff like that. Relationship or interpersonal insecurity. That occurs when we don't feel we have a supportive and trusting relationship. Yeah. It could be specific to either one relationship or group. And then general or personal insecurity. So that occurs when we're overly critical of our weaknesses. So yeah, if you're so insecure about certain things and it holds you back from trying to connect with other people, then that is definitely going to lead to suffering as well. So self-security, that's what we want, right? That's the open and non-judgmental acceptance of one's own weaknesses. So we talked about that before in the last chapter about perfectionism, and then there was, what was it? Self-compassion. And I was thinking about the self-compassion in terms of our discussion of that book last year with the Madly in Love with Me. Remember the branches of the tree that were like self-acceptance, self-love, all the self dash whatever. I was thinking of that self-compassion part of it being on the tree. So self-security, I don't believe that was on the tree, but it would be kind of like the self-compassion of being like, hey, I'm not perfect. I have this flaw, but so did 10 million other people, and I'm not the only one. And, you know, if you're religious and you think, well, God made every single one of us differently, and I'm amazing the way I am, and, you know, that would be a part of it too. But if you don't have that ability to accept flaws and you know, to kind of be like, yeah, I have strengths and weaknesses, and kind of own yourself, then you probably will have a lot of insecurity. And again, that insecurity probably has some deep roots from childhood, whether it's your family of origin or if it's just like experiences that you had early on and people might have been bullying you or teasing you, or you just didn't have acceptance. Then those things just sort of build up. And they mentioned like a neural pathway of one of them. It's like the more I'm learning about the brain and the way that we actually develop these neural pathways into like who we are today and things that trigger us, you know, and bring us back to a certain moment, it's such a matrix of so much. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting. So what about feeling invisible? Have you ever felt invisible? That's got to be the worst feeling. Ugh. Especially in a situation like, say, you were dating somebody and then you saw them on the street or something and they just totally ignored that you even existed. That's got to be the worst. It's like you just feel like, what, I'm not even like, I'm not even worthy of a glance or a smile or something, you know? Like, yeah, it's awful. Again, things I don't like to talk about, but here I am. I define indivisibility as a function of disconnection and dehumanization. Those are Brené's words. Where an individual or group's humanity and relevance are unacknowledged, ignored, or diminished in value or importance. So again, it doesn't have to be just you. It could be a group. Like I mentioned, some minorities, marginalized groups of people, you know, things like that. Yeah. Given that we're all here to be seen, known, and loved, invisibility is one of the most painful human experiences. I would agree. I would agree. And I'm just thinking actually too of like the Black Lives Matter movement in terms of the fact that those words that, you know, our lives matter, I'm sure it came out of a feeling of like our lives are so insignificant that what, we're invisible to everybody else, you know, or our deaths don't matter, they're not even seen, they're not reported on, stuff like that. So yeah, that would be like just bringing it into the current culture, our country anyway. And then I hate talking about these things, but loneliness. I think that's the last one to get through in here. So there's so much interconnectedness with all these words, as there are in every chapter. And Brené talks a lot about loneliness, because I think it was in the Gifts of Imperfection where she called it high lonely. It was like something that she came up with in her own family with her kids, that sometimes they knew this feeling of being with other people but actually being more lonely than if they were at home. And she called it high lonely, I think, if I'm remembering that right. Um, At the heart of loneliness is the absence of meaningful social interaction. An intimate relationship, friendships, family gatherings, or even community or work group connections. When I sat down and wrote down where do I feel like I belong, at least I did feel like maybe in like 50% of my life I belong, but then there's a lacking part of certain elements in that group of things that she just listed out. So hopefully if you are feeling lonely, it's not like in every single area. I feel like during COVID times, man, it was like every single area for people who lived alone like I did. I remember I did a video in 2020 where I was telling you guys I was so jealous of people like during COVID that at least had like a family member with them where they could like go do something together. And I just couldn't even be with anybody else. So that was very, very lonely for me. I still struggle with loneliness, but not to that degree. At least I have options now. Hopefully you do too. Yes, this is the last section of this chapter. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. We used to define loneliness as a gnawing chronic disease without redeeming features. It was equated with shyness, depression, being a loner, or antisocial, or possessing bad social skills. Yeah, I can understand that. They would say that. But I don't think that's actually true in terms of, especially not in terms of the research of this book. Loneliness is a lot more than that. It's usually not any fault of your own. Well, that could go either way. Because you could choose to let your insecurity and fear of not belonging and other things in this chapter overcome you and prevent you from going out and seeking companionship. I definitely feel like that in dating. Like I will not. I've been so hurt. I feel like another heartbreak would just end me. So I just totally don't even go there, even though like I want love so badly, you know. So I'm in that sense, I'm like, I'm lonely for a partner out of, it is my own fault because it's a self-preservation thing, because I'm too afraid of heartbreak and the things that I've experienced in the past is too triggering for me. So anyway, that this is me owning my issues here. I'm just saying it all out loud to you here. I think you guys know me pretty well from watching me for 3 years, if you have been watching me that long. So none of this is new information, but there's so many things that could go into being lonely, and I don't think that it comes down to like what they used to think in terms of like, oh, you're just a loner or you're antisocial or something's different about you. No, maybe you just haven't found that place of belonging. You haven't found your tribe. Hope you can find your tribe. Yeah. Thank you for listening to my ramblings here. I don't think there's anything else that I'm going to say here at the end of this, but I do hope that you can think about these things and maybe do what I did in your journal and write down, where do I belong and how do I feel when I belong and how do I want to feel in these other situations where I don't belong. And maybe there's nothing that you can do about it if it is a situation like with a family or a group, but you can sort of seek out experiences that are more like where you do belong. Or even just identifying, like, I'm really happy to say, like, I do have a part-time job right now and I feel like I belong there. Like, I really like the people I work with, and I feel like, yeah, I feel like I belong here, which is a nice feeling. So at least you can identify that. And maybe if I got into a work situation where I was like, I just don't belong here, like, that I hope that I wouldn't just try to keep enduring it, that I hope that I would uh, recognize that I like feeling that I belong, and that obviously that's something that I want in my life. So why perpetuate a job situation or something like that where I don't? Like, why not seek out a new group of friends or whatever it is where I'm not feeling I belong? Like, yeah. But I feel like at least I'm in, except for the dating situation that I mentioned earlier, but like at least in friendships or in social situations or doing something, the fear of not belonging doesn't hold me back. So that's good. But I definitely have work to do in these areas, I'm sure. But I'm grateful for friends who just say, just be yourself. And I hope that you also have that feeling in your own life. And definitely leave me a comment if you feel like you can be yourself, or maybe just tell me if you're struggling with being yourself, or whatever you want to say. I love hearing from you guys. Thank you so much for watching. The next chapter is going to be a good segue, and I'll have a lot to say about that. The places we go when the heart is open. Yeah, she's got a really good progression to this book. At the beginning, I was kind of, I don't know, like we're over halfway through it now. Actually, we're like 3/4 of the way through. Beginning, I wasn't sure what I was getting out of it, but the more we read and the way that the chapters are progressing, I'm really feeling like I'm getting a lot out of it. And I'm definitely doing a lot of journaling around it. It happens to tie into a lot of conversations with my therapist that I talk to regularly too. So definitely getting a lot out of it. Again, hope you are too. Love to you all. I will see you on the next video of our Year of the Heart. And thanks again for watching. Bye-bye.